You're watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country. Now, here's your host, former Alabama All-American, Mike Johnson.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back in Roll Tide Daily. My favorite 30 minutes of the day, and hopefully yours too. We are back at it again for this Wednesday edition, and I got to tell you guys, sometimes in the last couple of weeks, we started the show 2 weeks ago. Sometimes it's like, what am I going to talk about today? It's like, we're going to talk about recruiting, or we're going to bring on interviews. But sometimes the stories write themselves. Sometimes they put them right out there in front of you. And due to the spring meetings, due to what a lot of you guys have seen from Nick Saban yesterday, this script today has kind of written itself. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. We're also going to welcome in Corey Reamer, an old teammate of mine, number 13, number 1 in your programs, number 13 in your programs. I'm sorry, number 1 in your hearts. We're going to welcome him in a little bit later as well. For right now, let me update you. Yesterday, we talked about Alabama's golf score. The men's golf team wins 2 matches yesterday. They beat Texas Tech. They beat Duke in the semifinals. They're going to square off this afternoon against Oklahoma State over there in Stillwater on Oklahoma State's home golf course. So that should be fun. That should be interesting. Oklahoma State going to have a lot of fans there. Welcome y'all to tune in on Golf Channel, I believe, this afternoon. Root on Alabama's men's golf team. But without further ado, we're going to get to number 1 right here, and it has to do with Nick Saban and his rant down at spring meetings. Has to do with the national media and a lot of fans from other fan bases that are kind of blaming Nick Saban for this transfer rule, when really he's just following what the SEC has laid out for him. I know we have a lot of different emotions flowing in. A lot of you guys are going to comment in the comment section about what's going on with this whole transfer rule. Brandon Kennedy, it was Maurice Smith a while back, but I want you guys to kind of weigh in on this. And until then, let me let you see this audio clip. Let me play this audio clip from yesterday, Nick Saban's press conference down in Destin, when he's asked about withholding Brandon Kennedy from being able to transfer to Tennessee or Auburn or anywhere else inside the SEC. Let me play that for you.
I don't think it should be on me. I think we should change the rule. All right, if we agree in the SEC at these meetings that we're going to have free agency in our league and everybody can go wherever they want to go when they graduate, and that's what's best for the game, then I think that's what we should do. Then Brandon Kennedy can go wherever he wants to go. But if we don't do that, why is it on me? Because we have a conference rule that says he can't do it. And he can do it, but he's supposed to sit out for a year. So why is it on me? It's not even my decision. It's a conference rule. I always give people releases. And he has a release to go wherever he wants to go, but the conference rule says he can't go to the conference. So why is that on me?
You got to love that, don't you? Nick Saban just basically putting it out there. Why am I the scapegoat? Why is everybody pointing at Nick Saban? This has been a rule forever within the SEC, and I think where a lot of this language gets mixed up is this. I think that you saw Maurice Smith. Nick Saban sent this to the SEC office and says, you guys deal with this. I don't want to be a part of this. I love Maurice Smith. I love Kirby Smart. If he wants to go play at Georgia, that's his prerogative. But you have to release him. This has been an SEC rule for as long as I can remember. If you're an undergraduate student and you want to transfer inside of the conference, you have to sit out a year. You cannot just jump schools. Not only that, but you can't really jump schools within the SEC to begin with. So Nick Saban's like, listen, why am I the guy at the forefront of this? Why is everybody pointing at me? I'm not the bad guy in this. This is an SEC rule, and I just tend to be following along with this. A lot of you guys are weighing in. Lee Hood Skinner kind of echoes what we've been talking about. Conference rule, not the head coach's decision. End of discussion. I agree with you that. I'm actually for, kind of these intra-conference transfers when it comes to some of these guys. And we'll get into that conversation a little bit later, but I just wanted to make sure I played that audio clip for you guys so you understand a little bit where Nick Saban's mindset was. Another thing Nick Saban brings up that, listen, the national media is not going to be talking about this. Fans from other fan bases aren't going to be talking about this. Who's going to be talking about this next point is head coaches, because they're the ones that have to deal with these players on a daily basis. They're the ones that have to make sure these kids are going to class. If you can't hold football over their head, if they can just leave whenever they want to, what's to say they don't just up and leave if you get suspended for a game? And Nick Saban had rants about that. I'll let you guys hear that right here.
The Maurice Smith thing wasn't on me either.
Would you like just clarity on it's either the rule or it's not the rule? It seems like there's a rule.
Let me ask you a question. If we make a rule that guys can transfer whenever they want to transfer, how are we supposed to get people to do what they should do? I'm not talking about as football players. I'm talking about as people. I'm talking about making good choices and decisions off the field. I'm talking about doing the right things academically. So if a guy's missing class and I say, you're not going to play in this game because you're missing class, which I've done on occasion, and then he just says, well, I'm transferring. Is that good? Okay. I don't know. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm asking you all a question. You don't ever seem to have to answer the questions like that.
It seemed like
you
in this case it's going to
Brooke Trout look.
I think that's so great by Nick Saban right there. You kind of get a little introspective look inside the program in Alabama and how Nick Saban really has to deal with players on a daily basis, right? That's something most fans don't think about. When you hear Tennessee fans, they're like, oh, they won't let Brandon Kennedy come to Tennessee. They're scared of Tennessee. Or, hey, you won't let him go to Auburn. You're scared he's going to come back and bite you. This is what Nick Saban's talking about. This is why the conference as a whole has to kind of look into this rule and really decide what's best. I mean, I think that really the conference as a whole and the dynamics changing. Everybody knows that transfer rules, the dynamics are changing. Transfers have become a bigger part of college football than a lot of people I played with never even thought they would, never even thought about transferring, but it's become a big part of college football. And here we are talking about it here because Nick Saban had to bring it up and he got questioned about it and he got upset. Rightfully so, he got upset. Another thing that I think was interesting about this topic too that a lot of people don't want to talk about, I tweeted about this yesterday and you guys follow me on Twitter at mpjohnson79. I think there's a point that a lot of people are missing when it comes to this Nick Saban transfer rule, when it comes to people that are leaving Alabama. I think a lot of programs like Tennessee, Auburn, LSU, possibly even Georgia, Florida, they look at Alabama. They look at all the talent that Nick Saban signed, and they think they're going to go in there and pillage Alabama, right? They think, we're going to go in and get Maurice Smith. We're going to find a Brandon Kennedy. We're going to try to find possibly a Jalen Hurts, some kind of guy that's been inside of that program that was a five-star player that's not on the field, that's unhappy, that wants to head to another destination. But here's what they're not thinking about. Let me give you guys the flip side of this. Trey Smith at Tennessee, possible All-American left tackle. Braden Fajoko, defensive lineman at LSU. Greedy Williams, a cornerback at LSU. The corners down at Florida, Henderson and Wilson. A lot of guys are from Georgia. You can't tell me that a lot of those guys, in the midst of coaching changes at their schools, don't want to land somewhere like Alabama where they can play under Nick Saban, where they can go get the top flight coaching, head off to the NFL, possibly win a national championship on their way, be a part of an SEC title. People aren't thinking about that. These other schools that want to talk down, the national media, they're not thinking about that. I think the basis here of what Nick Saban's arguing about is this. I think he's okay with the rule, but he wants to make sure that the rest of the conference is okay when it slaps him right back in the face, because the bottom line is this. Nick Saban has adjusted to rule changes better than any coach in the history of college football. He's had rule changes thrown after him right after left. He's had transfer rules. We're going to get into a rule here in just a second that he quoted on yesterday. But he adjusted these rules really well. And I think that fans from other fan bases are really kidding themselves if they think that their fan base is going to come out on the better end of what Nick Saban's trying to do right now. It's just not possible. When you have the turnover from Butch Jones, when you have the turnover from everything that's going on, I think he's got to be nervous about what's kind of going on right there. I think we have Corey Reamer on the line right now. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump in with Corey. We have another couple topics to get to, but Corey, thanks for joining us today, brother. How you doing?
Hey, man, I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing really good, man. And I got a funny story here for the audience that's listening to us right now. I have you can't see us right now, but I have a 17 helmet sitting right here on the desk. I always thought one of the funny things, you and John Parker, two of my good buddies from back then, 13 and 14 on the roster, right? You guys, the number 12 was on the helmet for what, 17 years from 92 to 2009? You guys thought you'd get a ton of shine, didn't you? That 13 gets on the helmet. 2 years later, Bama wins another national championship, and then 14's on the helmet for another year. A little bit of a slap in the face, but I think you're still pretty beloved by Alabama fans.
Man, I just the paint didn't even get to dry on the helmet when they put 13 on it before they were replacing it for the next one, man. Didn't even have a jersey get made or anything. I don't know what I think they were just mad because 13 is supposed to be the unlucky number, and they were afraid to put it on there, and it didn't get any love. It felt like it just jumped straight from 12 to 14. Get no love for the 13 out there.
Yeah, I got to agree with you that, man. That 13 was gone in a hurry, and I know a lot of Alabama fans loved you back in that 13 jersey, but it didn't stay on that helmet for very long. So, Corey, I'm going to bring you in on a discussion. We've been having it since the top of the show. We didn't get a chance to hop on the mouse doo-doo part of the conversation from Nick Saban yesterday just yet, but Nick Saban goes on a rant yesterday. He's talking about this transfer rule that's in place. He's talking about how it's an SEC rule. It's not really on Nick Saban. The national media has kind of made him out to be the face of this rule and the opposition to this rule. I, for one, and I know that you and I have talked about this, I, for one, think some of these other football teams around the SEC need to be careful. Where do you kind of fall on this subject? I mean, transfers weren't even really a big deal back when we were on the roster. Nobody even thought about leaving school. Now with early enrollees, you have guys wanting to jump ship after 2 and 3 years.
Yeah, I think, first of all, Coach Saban's always going to be the one that's going to take the most flack. When you're the defending national champion, you've had the success that he has, he's always going to be the one that, and I'm sure he probably, as much as he seems like he hates it, I'm sure he loves every minute of it, that they're wearing him out about it. But it's definitely something that, like you and I discussed, it's not something that was ever even on the radar, when we were playing. So I think that's the reason why this thing is taken off like it has, is just because the game of college football has changed so much, where players coming in are immediately thinking about, it might not even be on the radar for them to stick around for their entire length of their eligibility, that they're already looking at, well, it's like, look at Tua. He was already thinking about transferring 1 year in after he wasn't playing last year as a true freshman. And the thing with when you and I were there, it wasn't even really a thought that crossed our mind about playing significantly as a true freshman. It was kind of being an apprentice and learning the craft and getting ready for whenever your time came to step in and play. And nowadays, it's just such a norm for freshmen to get out there and play. So it's definitely, I would say that the rule that is out there that Coach Saban keeps referring to, that it is a rule. So he's not wrong in that regard, but it seems that it's now a dated rule, just judging on how the college football has changed. The landscape has changed so much. And, I think that there's two different sides of every story, and I have a hard time coming up with a conclusion, except for the fact that I do agree that the rule for undergrads it needs to stay the same. I think that Coach Saban's making his argument. A lot of the things that he brings up is really something that would really apply to undergrads more so than graduates. So I agree that there should be limitations and restrictions on undergrads being able to transfer whenever they please and being able to play immediately. I think that's a can of worms that you really don't want to open up. But I do think that if a kid does graduate, that he should be given a little bit more leeway and being able to transfer if he's not happy at the school that he's at. But also from that perspective, you look at what that could do from a coaching perspective in getting kids to graduate as fast as they possibly can. And you know as well as I do that, after every season, coaches have to look at their roster and look at players that, they got to make room for these kids that are signing, and there's a limitation on how many kids that can sign. Well, now you're giving a coach another option of shuffling kids out of the program to make room for some of these new signees. So there's just a whole different thing. There's a whole lot of topics that need to be discussed through this deal, but I do agree that if a kid does his part and graduates and gets a degree, he should be able to look at other schools if there's a better opportunity for them to go play somewhere else instead of being restricted, to be only outside the SEC without having to sit out a year.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that one. I think it's kind of it's a double-edged sword, really, when we talk about undergrad and graduates. And Corey, you're getting a lot of love in the comment section right now. Daniel Rica's weighing in, so Corey's a good guy and a great ambassador for Alabama football. Doug E. Edge Sr. on Facebook also weighing in from Hoover, Alabama, and Corey, of course, being a Hoover grad. So I want to bring you in, too, on a different conversation. I had this conversation with our boy John Parker last week. This has been kind of a hot topic over here in the city of Atlanta, which I live in. A lot of Georgia fans over this way that love Kirby Smart. You had a chance to play for Jeremy Pruitt at Hoover High School and at Alabama and play for Kirby Smart as your defensive coordinator over at Alabama. John Parker kind of infamously at this point said that he believes that Jeremy Pruitt is scarier in the long run for Alabama football than Kirby Smart possibly could be at Georgia over there. What's your opinion on that? I mean, I tend to disagree with him, but seeing as how Alabama plays Tennessee every year, I kind of see where he's coming from.
Oh, man, I think John Parker might want to, probably after the fact that he said that and the heat that he caught from it, I think he might want to go back and change what he said. I don't think he expected to get that kind of backlash, but I can see where he's coming from. I just feel like that there's a lot of similarities between the two guys. And I think that what Kirby walked into at Georgia versus what Pruitt's walking into at Tennessee is two totally different programs. Where Tennessee is as far as the talent-wise versus what Georgia was when Kirby took over, I think there's a pretty big difference as far as that goes. But both of them, it's amazing to see how these guys have taken over, and we'll see what Pruitt does, immediately as far as being in the CEO role. And I think that's going to be a new task for him and see how he handles that. And I think Kirby handled it very well. I think both of them are built to be extremely good coaches, and it's going to make the East Division extremely competitive as the West has kind of ruled the SEC in the last few years. I will say that Coach Pruitt, as far as X's and O's goes, I don't think that there's a better coach out there that understands the game of football like he does. I think that you can just look at from him going for being my defensive backs coach in high school to moving up to defensive coordinator at Hoover and then showing up at Alabama as a player personnel guy and how quickly he moved into an on-the-field role and then taking over a defensive coordinator position at Florida State and at Georgia before he came back to Alabama just shows you how respected he is as a X's and O's guy, how well he understands defenses. And Kirby, spent a number of years under Coach Saban before ultimately taking the Georgia job. I think that either way you look at it, both are going to be headaches for Alabama fan bases because they're both good coaches. They both relate to players extremely well, and they're both at programs that have been historically been good. Tennessee obviously having a little bit more of a downturn here in the last decade or so than Georgia has, but I'm not going to be shocked if he is able to turn that program around and quickly, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the nature of the beast when you talk about Jeremy Pruitt, you talk about X's and O's. I think Kirby Smart kind of goes along those same lines. So I don't think that's a narrative that's going to change anytime soon. One of the things we have been talking about under Kirby Smart and Jeremy Pruitt both was the lineage of linebackers, and obviously you're a part of that lineage there at Alabama. This year's linebackers, and it's projection season. We're in the middle of May and June right now, so all the Athlons are coming out. Athlon has listed Alabama's linebacking core as the #1 linebacking unit in the country last year. Obviously thinking a lot of Mack Wilson, thinking a lot of Dylan Moses. Have you had a chance to watch those guys? What do you think the ceiling is as far as that linebacking core next year?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. You look at how many five-star guys are sitting there in the linebacker room, outside linebackers and inside linebackers, and they only keep bringing in more of these five-star guys. And you've got some guys that were five-stars that, that aren't even making an impact yet. So I think that the preseason ranking right now is probably warranted just from the talent that you were able to see. Not that they had I think Mack Wilson and Dylan Moses, being our inside projected guys, got a total of 4 starts between the two of them. So it might be a little too early to call it, but I think what you saw out of both of those guys last year in the limited roles that they had and how they stepped up when some of the other guys went down and they filled the role, filled in extremely well. I think that there's a reason for that expectation, but then you also look at guys as far as your outside linebackers go. You got Anthony Jennings, who played extremely well for us in a lot of snaps last year, goes down in the Sugar Bowl, wasn't really able to participate in the spring, but he's an impactful player, and I think that when you get Christian Miller and Terrell Lewis back, those are the two guys that I think we missed the most last year. So the main thing for us is going to be able to keep these guys healthy. And when you lose as much as Alabama's defense lost last year, you had 8 guys that were drafted, and Tony Brown, who is also, was able to be picked up in free agency. That's 9 guys that contributed a lot of snaps last year off of Alabama's defense. There's got to be somebody who's going to step up and take leadership and ownership of those roles. And when you're replacing an entire back half, an entire secondary, that's always difficult. It's going to be on these guys that that have the most experience, and a lot of that is in the linebacker room to take ownership of the leadership of this defense and make sure that everybody's on the same page. There's a lot of communication that goes on, and it really starts with those linebackers. The main thing that I think we're going to have to be watching for is keeping these guys healthy, because at inside you really don't have a ton of depth, and Keith Holcomb has been a phenomenal player for us, and we're not real sure what's going to happen with him as far as him coming back in the fall. You lose that guy that has the most experience out of any of them, you're really going to be looking at a very green group of guys that they're expecting to take a big role in this defense to making sure that they don't slack off any from the performance that they had last year. But there's plenty of talent. I know that much. You got a lot of guys in that's going to be playing next year for that defense that were highly recruited guys and have shown up as freshmen and really contributed on special teams and playing limited defensive snaps that we're going to be relying on heavily next year. But they've proven that they can handle that, and I'm excited to watch them play.
Boy, that's a lot of good stuff right there from Corey Reamer, one of my old teammates, number 13, obviously, from that 2009 National Championship team. Corey, I appreciate you joining us today, buddy, and look forward to having you back on again in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Looking forward to it, and Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, buddy. Thanks a lot, and that's Corey Reamer. And a lot of you guys chiming in on Facebook and YouTube as well. A lot of Roll Tides coming in. Alex Brown, Gail, Caldwell Allen. I hope I'm pronouncing all these right. Ty Madden, Terry Bunch. Joe DeCasey, Chris Williams, all Roll Tides coming in. Martha Dean, Pat Fitzpatrick says hello. Hello, Martha. How are you doing today? And glad you guys can join us right now. If you love the show, if you love Alabama football, if you like talking about it daily, please hop on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and share the show, and make sure you're getting it out there to all your Alabama friends so we can get on here and kind of hold court every day and be able to talk about the latest news and headlines as far as Alabama football goes. Now, before we go any further, I do want to dip into, I thought was the quote of the day yesterday from SEC spring meetings. Nick Saban talking about this new rule, right? This new rule that they're putting in place. It seems to be kind of anti-Saban, if you will, and we touched on this a little bit last week in Andy Staples' column, but Nick Saban was asked a little bit about the 20 headset rule that they're kind of putting in now in college football, and he had an interesting quote. Let me let you see this quote right here. Mike Griffith from SEC Country picks this quote up from yesterday. He dips back into it, and he has a quote about mouse manure. I'm going to see if we can get that loaded up here pretty soon. There it is right there. I don't know who is driving all this stuff, Coach Saban says, but to me it's kind of like mouse manure when you're up to your ears in elephant doo-doo. Boy, I thought that was the quote of the day, and it really says a lot about how Nick Saban views a lot of the coaches from around the country, views a lot of the rules that, listen, we're dealing with so much stuff right now. We're dealing with trying to coach these football players. We're dealing with transfer rules. We're dealing with all these things on the sideline. You're coming at me with every direction from rules. We talked about it last week. And he's like, what's the deal with this? I think we touched on this last week. I got a couple of Andy Staples quotes from last week's graphic about how these rules never seem to limit Nick Saban. Why did the NCAA's Oversight Committee make this rule? Because of Nick Saban. Just like every other rule designed to slow the march of Saban's team towards more national titles, this one will fail to achieve its intended purpose. He goes on to say in a later quote throughout that article, I think we got the graphic coming up right here. That's the only graphic we have right there for that one. But it is interesting to me when you talk about Andy Staples, when you talk about that kind of quote from him, when you kind of piece it together with Nick Saban and the way he feels about all this stuff. Why are we worried about this? Why are we worried about 20 headsets? Why are you guys coming down on me? Why can I not have everybody on my sideline wearing a headset that knows exactly what we're doing? And I think this is another rule that, like Andy Staples said, is designed to kind of stop Nick Saban from winning national titles. It's not going to work. It's just like we were talking about the transfer rule earlier. He adjusts and he evolves to these rules better than anybody in the history of college football. A lot of you guys still tuning in. Martha Dean Fitzpatrick says, I'm always here. Roll Tide. Tom Gatlin. Crimson Nation. I think it's interesting to hear you guys. David Hardy says he can't deal with Sarah Jessica Parker Wilson. That's funny stuff right there. John Parker is my boy, and so I'm always going to back him. I don't agree with what he said about Jeremy Pruitt versus Kirby Smart, but that's his opinion, and we always appreciate him giving it. Now, another topic about Kirby Smart and Nick Saban that came up yesterday, spring meetings. This is topic number 3 for today that I thought was really interesting because we've kind of heard an alternate version of this, right? We always hear coaches that kind of recruit against Nick Saban. And what do they use? Well, first of all, they say there's too many 5-stars, you're not going to get on the field. But more recently, we've heard of a lot of coaches coming out and saying, Nick Saban's old. He's not going to coach much longer. And we talked about that last week a little bit. It comes out in an article that there's some kind of Saban assistants from the past, be it Will Muschamp, be it Jimbo Fisher, be it Kirby Smart, be it Jeremy Pruitt, that are coming out and saying, you know what, he might be close to retirement. But Kirby Smart kind of refutes this yesterday. Let you see this quote from Kirby Smart yesterday talking about Nick Saban, his tenure at Alabama, how long he possibly thinks he can go. This is Kirby Smart yesterday talking to Bama Online. That's up to Nick. I think Nick's in great health. He takes care of himself. He plays a lot of golf. I think he's going to coach as long as he wants to because he's competitive. He doesn't want to do anything else, and he's good at what he does. Boy, I love that right there because you know what? Everybody that's kind of recruiting against Nick Saban, all the Georgias and the Tennessees of the world, and probably the Auburns too, are going out there saying, well, you know, Nick's getting close. The dynasty is getting close to being over. He's old. He can't do it again like he used to. He can't adjust. It's just not true. And I think that Kirby Smart was kind of forced to kind of put it bluntly there when he's asked about it from Bama Online. That, listen, I don't think he's retiring anytime soon. Kirby Smart says, listen, I played basketball with the guy for probably like 20 years, it felt like. The guy's in great health. He's going to coach as long as he wants to. I think that's awesome to see from Kirby Smart. Maybe a small bearing of the hatchet from some of the stuff you've heard out of that Georgia program in terms of the way they've been recruiting, some of the things they've been doing. I think we have another quote from Kirby Smart as well, possibly on there. If a kid asks me that, I'm like, hey, he may coach forever because he may outlive me. The way he takes care of his body, I think that's to each his own. So that is very interesting coming out of Kirby Smart's mouth. Obviously, the reigning SEC champion also had the #1 recruiting class this past year. Kirby Smart was beloved by a ton of Alabama fans, but some people do question whether or not Kirby Smart has stayed on track in terms of that and his allegiances to Nick Saban. And I think that's kind of an interesting kind of quote to come out about him, because I agree with it. I think Nick Saban's going to coach as long as he wants to. I think we talked about to Chris Lowe last week. He gave the term maybe at least 5 more years. I tend to agree with that. I think it's 5 to 7 more years, and then he heads into an administrative job and recruits whoever the next head coach is going to be, and has a heavy handprint on whoever is going to be leading that team in the near future. Now, for one of my segments to close out the show, I think this is an exciting segment because I don't think anybody else is doing this. Now, Scott Cochran, I told you guys last week, Scott Cochran sends out videos, right? He's got like this text message chain that he sends out to all the players and all his former players and even some media members. And they're always motivational videos. Last week, we showed you a little bit of that Bear Bryant commercial. This week, with Alabama's players reporting yesterday and diving into some of these offseason workouts and some of the freshmen showing up, Scott Cochran wanted to get a little bit more motivational with this video. Now, it's a long video. We're only going to show you the little first part of it, but I got to tell you, it made me want to run through a wall, made me want to put the sneakers back on and head back out on the practice field there at the Malmore facility and run some 110s with him, although I probably couldn't do it this day and age. But I wanted you guys to see this video Scott Cochran sent out just so you can get a feel for where this Alabama player's mindset is right now.
If you build it on Monday, if you build it on Tuesday, if you build it on Wednesday, I want you to understand that it's not going to happen by luck. Productivity is always intentional and deliberate. And on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, no luck, guys. Every single day, if you do a little, you're going to wake up one day and your dreams are going to be a reality.
You got to love that right there, don't you? That's just a small snippet of what Scott Cochran is kind of sending out to these players this day and age. He's got a lot of great content. We're going to be sure to show you at least one video each week, and kind of that Scott Cochran video of the week. A lot of you guys comment in the comment section. Becky Burton-Pitcher says they hate us because they ain't us, talking about Georgia and talking about whoever else wants to chime in on Nick Saban's future with Alabama. Deborah McCullough Mangum, Roll Tide, obviously. Robbie Harris, I'm pumped. Robbie Harris talking about Nick Saban's future and his tenure there at Alabama, says winning keeps you young. Boy, I got to agree with that, right? I mean, winning's kind of the cure-all when you talk about coaches. I think he can stay relatively young if he doesn't get into too many more media rants like he did yesterday. I think that Nick Saban's blood pressure is staying pretty low. And so Doug E. Edge Sr. weighs in and says Nick is the only Nick. I absolutely agree with that. Daniel Rica says, Mike, I have a game day program with you on the cover. Any chance you'll be doing any public-private signings? I'm not currently. I'd love to, and obviously we'll be here at SEC Country for the foreseeable future, hopefully, and get to do the show as long as we can. So we'll make sure we try to line that up. So I appreciate everybody weighing in today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the show, enjoyed Corey Reamer. We're going to try to post this on our Facebook page, obviously. If you want to watch it back later, please share the show with your friends. If you love Alabama football, if you like what we're doing here, anybody who can get the message out is a big part of what we do. And we love people coming in the comment section, love talking to you guys. Becky Burton-Pitcher says number 18 in 2018. I think we're all hoping for that and agreeing for that on the road to 18 in 2018. I hope you guys have a great day. We'll be back here tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern time, noon Central. Until then, Roll Tide, everybody.
You've been watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country.